So we're just about ready to get started here. Again, just one more quick introduction before we introduce our speakers for the next session, our first session of the day. If you're just joining us, if you want to go ahead and put your microphones on mute. If you want to put any questions for the presenters, which we'll have some time at the end of the presentation to enter questions for the presenters, you can utilize the chat option. It's right up there in the upper right-hand corner next to the clock and the number of attendees. You can chat a question in there that our presenters will hopefully be able to respond to before the end of the session. The presenters will speak for about 20 or 25 minutes, and then at the end of that, they will respond to any of your questions. But without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Allie Elderman and Molly Morrill from Gorham Savings Bank, and they are here to present the topic of fraud and strategies for Maine businesses. Take it away.
Thank you, Tommy. Give me just a minute here to share my screen with you all. Hi everyone, my name is Molly Morrill. I am the Fraud Program Manager at Gorham Savings Bank. Today my focus is going to be discussing fraud prevention. Fraud can be devastating to a business that is not prepared, so we're going to discuss some of the latest fraud trends and provide you some tips on how to prevent it. So I'd like to start with discussing check fraud. As a business, you're using checks all the time. You're paying your vendors, you're paying your employees, and then as someone that is trying to commit fraud, there are various ways that they can conduct fraud through using checks. They could forge a check. If they're able to gain access to your checkbook, they can sign your name, make it payable to whomever they'd like. They could alter a check. So if they're able to gain access to a check that you made payable to a business, they could change that payee name or even alter the check amount. And then counterfeit checks, if they're actually able to gain access to all your banking information, they could input that on their own check stock and create a whole check using that information. So recently within Southern Maine, we saw two different types of fraud happening that resulted in check fraud. We had mail fraud, which was a group of individuals that were targeting unsecured business mailboxes. So say, for example, you're a business that is there Monday through Friday. However, mail still gets delivered on Saturdays to your mailbox. Not a big deal, you just wait till Monday to collect that information. Unfortunately, this group was looking for exactly that. They were targeting those mailboxes when you weren't there on the weekends. They would go intercept that mail, and then they're looking to either intercept checks that were coming into you in order to alter them or steal the banking information. Checks you had going out of the mail, they do the same, or they're looking to obtain just your banking information, create a counterfeit check utilizing that. Also, in a more personal way, but still impactful to businesses, if you're carrying around a business checkbook or anything like that, they were actually targeting cars, either stealing cars or conducting car burglaries for people that were leaving that information within the car. Generally, these locations were like a gym where you need it with you, but you may not necessarily need it inside, daycares, church parking lots. Those were huge targets because most likely those people don't need that information with them. They might just leave it in their car thinking nothing of it. Unfortunately, that's how they were getting access to banking information and checks, and then they were utilizing that to commit check fraud. Now that we have discussed what check fraud is and how it occurs, I would like to invite Julie Turner, Treasurer at RJ Grondin & Sons, to provide her check fraud story to you all.
Hello there. My name is Julie Turner. I'm the Treasurer for RJ Grondin & Sons in Gorham, Maine. I want to thank Molly and Gorham Savings Bank for inviting me here to talk about our experience with check fraud and what we did to mitigate risk. It's definitely an important topic. As you may have heard, check fraud is making a comeback. Don't let this happen to you. Some sucker, can I pay you later? With that, I'll move on to why I'm here, and that is to talk a little bit about our personal experience with check fraud. Back in October of last year, we received a call from Gorham Savings Bank letting us know they thought we had a fraudulent check trying to clear our account. After some research, we agreed that it was in fact a fraudulent check, and the check number that was used was the same check number for a check we cut a vendor a few weeks prior, which the vendor never received. At the time, we had voided and reissued another check thinking it was lost in the mail and never really gave it another thought. However, after making this connection, we contacted the vendor again to ask some additional information. And he said he left early on Friday prior to the mail being delivered. So the mail sat in the mailbox over the weekend, and he believes he had some checks stolen. At that point, we knew we had a few options, one of which was to close the account. However, we all know what an administrative nightmare it is to close an account and reopen another one. And who's to say we don't have the same thing happen a few weeks or months later? After talking with Gorham Savings Bank about our options, we decided to implement check and ACH positive pay. Now, contrary to what you might believe, it was very easy to implement and train and doesn't add more than 5 extra minutes each week for us to upload our check register to the website. And for those of you not familiar with how positive pay works, we provide a check register with a date, payee amount, and check number. And if the check clearing our account doesn't match all these parameters, an email is generated and sent to us to let us know we have a check exception report out on the website. We can then log in, view the checks, and either pay or return them. We have until 11 a.m. to do so, and if we do not make a decision by then, the checks will be returned. We intentionally set it up that way and figured in the event a legitimate check is returned, we can call the vendor, apologize, and reissue the check. Better to be safe than sorry. To this date, we've had a total of 20 checks trying to clear our account to the tune of almost $31,000. Positive Pay caught all these checks, and I was able to return them with a mouse click. So for under $400 a year, to have Positive Pay on our account, it was truly a no-brainer for us. Just the peace of mind alone is worth it, in my humble opinion. I have been working with Julie Brooks, a senior risk officer from Gorham Savings Bank, because there have been so many fraudulent checks, and she's been working with the Gorham PD. As you may have heard, back earlier this year, there were some thieves in the Gorham area stealing mail from mailboxes. Hopefully they've gotten to the bottom of it. Thankfully, the bank caught this initial fraud, or we wouldn't have caught this until we did the monthly reconciliation. And at that point, there would have been a process in getting our money back. You can decide if you want to be proactive or take the chance of being reactive as we were, and it might not work out as well for you as it did for us. In the end, you have to ask yourself one question. Do you feel lucky, punk? Thank you, and stay safe out there.
So how do you prevent this type of fraud? We have discussed what check fraud is, the different types of check fraud, and the impacts it could have on your business if it were to occur. So how do you protect yourself? Review your account activity often. If you can, review it daily. This provides you insight into what's going on in your account and the opportunity to let the bank know as soon as possible so they can take action as well. Have internal controls such as dual authorization. This would definitely depend on the size of your organization and the employees that you have available in order to do this. However, if you were to, for example, have an employee that makes all the checks payable to the employees, the vendors, and then someone else sign off on that activity, that would ensure that 2 people are always looking at those checks. We discussed mail fraud earlier. If you have an unsecured mailbox, there are a couple of options. You could get a P.O. box. You could have your mail delivered inside the office or even have it held over the weekend if you're not there. That would ensure that people don't have access to that confidential information when you are not around. Gorham Savings Bank also has Positive Pay and ACH Positive Pay services that you can implement on your account to help protect you. Other banks may have services such as this, and ensuring you know what those are and implement them if necessary could be very beneficial to your business. Another type of fraud that I would like to discuss is wire fraud. Depending on your business, you may or may not issue wires on a regular basis. However, for people committing fraud, wires are very appealing because they are a fast form of payment and they're difficult to recover once the funds are sent. I like to remind people that issuing a wire is like sending cash, and you always want to ensure that you are confident with where and who the funds are going to. Wire fraud can happen in a variety of ways. However, the most common is through business email compromise. Say John Smith is an executive at your company. The people committing fraud are able to gain access to John's email account, and now they can act on his behalf. This is a valid email account for your business, and they're going to utilize it to make requests. They send an email to John's coworker, Mary. They're going to request a wire to be sent. This may be difficult for Mary to question because the email appears to be coming from John, and maybe John has the authorization to request wires, and he could even do so on a regular basis. The benefit of compromising an email is that someone can pretend to be you much easier. They don't need to look or sound like John. They just need to act on his behalf. They even could go as far as ensuring they communicate the way John communicates by reviewing your sent emails to mimic that communication style. Now, there are ways to identify suspicious email requests for wires to be issued, and we will discuss that next. So how do you prevent wire fraud? We discussed how wire fraud generally originates through business email compromise. But what are the things you can look for to help indicate that this may be a fraudulent request? What do you tell your employees to look for and what steps they should be taking? And how do you protect your business? One of the best practices for wires I can tell anyone is to confirm the instructions with a different form of contact. If they emailed you instructions, call and confirm those. This ensures that if the email communication channel has been compromised, that you are communicating with that person in a channel that is not compromised. With email, have them looking for any unusual urgency to the request and any spelling errors. Get insurance coverage. As a business, you probably already have insurance in place, but do you know if it covers wire fraud? Do you know how it works? Understanding the insurance you have or ensuring that you get insurance that covers this scenario could be key. So there is another type of fraud that I want to discuss here today, as it is currently ongoing, and it could impact your business, your employees, your friends, your family, or yourself. There is a Nigerian crime ring that is operating that is known as the Scattered Canary, and they've been known to commit tax fraud. They have now shifted their focus and begun benefiting from the global pandemic of COVID-19. This is a well-organized fraud ring that is utilizing stolen personal identifying information to either file fraudulent unemployment claims or intercept valid unemployment claims and gain access to those funds. I just want to briefly walk through some scenarios that may happen to you or someone you know that could indicate that you or them could be a victim. You receive a notice from your employer notifying you of an application for unemployment benefits. You receive funds deposited in your bank account that you were not expecting. You receive letters regarding an unemployment application that you did not file. You have received funds deposited in your bank account and have been contacted by someone instructing you to withdraw the funds and send them to somebody. Now, those are some scenarios on how you could identify that you are a victim or someone you know is a victim of a fraudulent unemployment claim. You could definitely identify it from another source. However, if you are a victim, you should take action. You should report the activity. You can report it through your state government website or justice.gov. You should advise your bank. If you received funds, you should contact them and advise of that activity. And you should secure your identity. If you are a victim of a fraudulent unemployment claim, your identity has been compromised, and idtheft.gov will have best practices and next steps for you to follow in order to protect yourself. I would like to thank you all for joining today, and now invite my colleague, Allie Elderman, to discuss some IT best practices with you.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, you're good, Allie.
All right, so my name is Allie Elderman. I'm the Information Security Officer at Gorham Savings Bank, and I'm here to talk to everybody today about some IT best practices. I think under the new normal, these are becoming more and more important. Let's go over some types of internet fraud. You may be familiar with most of these. Social engineering, such as phishing, spear phishing, and whale phishing. There's also CEO fraud and business email account takeover. Malicious or phony websites, support scams. These are a bit newer, but these are, for example, you get a call from somebody saying they're from Dell, Apple, Microsoft, and they need to access your system in order to provide support because either there's something going on or you have a virus. These also can come about as pop-ups from websites. And the issue is typically when people fall for these, they end up giving a lot of information out, such as account numbers and passwords. There's also some COVID-specific scams. Molly talked about the unemployment fraud. There's also things such as government assistance fraud, vaccine and insurance fraud. The techniques used in these are not really any different. It's really just people taking advantage of the panic that's going on. Let's talk about CEO fraud for a moment. CEO fraud can be very devastating to a business. This is typically how thieves will engage in wire fraud, and it can come in a number of flavors. The first of which is pretty basic, but they can simply spoof the name of the sender, as is the case in this example. More advanced techniques can actually spoof the domain, which makes it seem much more authentic. To avoid that, you need to ensure that you have the following standards properly configured. I've listed these below: SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. Having all of these properly configured makes it very, very difficult to spoof somebody's domain. If you pay for somebody to manage your domain or your email, check the documentation just to ensure that these are configured, or reach out to support. But if it's something you manage yourself, you want to make sure that these are both enabled and properly configured. Finally, CEO fraud can take place when an email account is actually taken over. This happens 99% of the time that this happens, it's because of a password being leaked or weak authentication standards. We'll talk about strong passwords in a moment, but I also want to encourage everyone to enable multi-factor authentication every single place that it's available. It's available on most major websites, including things like Facebook. And MFA, for those who don't know, is simply a third step. So you have your username, your password, and once you try to log in, it may send you a text message with a code, an email with a code, or you might have an application that helps you log in after that. I want to encourage folks to stay up to date, enable automatic updates whenever they're available. And if you manage a lot of devices, you may want to look into a vulnerability management solution. That'll help you take care of things that don't automatically update, as well as find issues with automatic updates that didn't take. I'd also strongly encourage everyone to be using a password manager. There's many free and paid versions out there. I just want to show you examples of some bad passwords, such as summer 2019. Things that include your anniversary, your birthday. These are things that bad actors look for, and especially in cases where MFA is not enabled, it's a very easy way to access your system. What a password manager can do, they have a number of features, but they can help generate very, very strong passwords. They can, go up to incredible lengths, very complex and random, which makes it impossible to guess. The other thing that they can do is they can remember those passwords for you, which is probably the biggest benefit. And with a lot of the paid versions, you can also get access to features such as being able to automatically log into websites and even apps on your phone. I want to talk about signs of a social engineering attempt and how you can detect it yourself. Pay attention to things like attachments or links that you weren't expecting, requests after you click on a link to enter your, for example, Microsoft credentials. There's a lot of fraud going on around that now, where you'll click on, for example, what looks like a link to a Zoom meeting, and it'll ask you to enter your Microsoft credentials or your Windows credentials, when in fact they're just harvesting your passwords. Pay attention to the tone of the caller or the sender. Are they trying to create a sense of urgency or making threats? And did you expect the email or the request? That can be a big tip-off, especially with things like CEO fraud happening. Antivirus is essential for your PCs. Even Apple devices should have antivirus on there. Paid versions are typically best, although Microsoft Defender, which is included with your Windows license, is a very good solution. Just make sure that you have some sort of schedule set up for your scan so that you're able to scan often. And managing all of this can be a full-time job. Depending on the size of your business, it may make more sense to outsource. It can allow you to focus more on running your business and less on this kind of stuff. And finally, find a few links here for additional resources, a couple from the FTC and another from the IRS.